Welcome everyone to Dr. John Bedker's Leadership Podcast, the podcast focused on leadership. The episode will begin shortly. Thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy the podcast.
Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Dr. John Bedker Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, John Bedker. Well, as Bob Dylan said, the times they are a-changin'. Well, we're certainly living in turbulent times. A almost daily occurrence, chaos, instability, uncertainty, the unknown. Questions about where are we heading? How did we get to where we are? How will we get to tomorrow, to next month, to next year? Well, this podcast is all about leadership, and today we will explore this notion brought about by Bob Dylan, the times that are a-changin'. These times are changing for leaders everywhere. Well, when did the changing begin? Seems a reasonable starting point. Unfortunately, the answer is not clear. The world we are now in did not just happen. It has perhaps not had the visibility or awareness that it has today. The internet, social media, the pandemic, and many more factors have all played a role. But our world today is very different, more chaotic, more unstable, more uncertain. History is being reframed. There genuinely is a new world order. Perhaps the conditions we now see daily have been in the hearts and minds of people for a long time, maybe forever. And lately their views are now public for all to see, to hear about, and experience. We know, for instance, Donald Trump won the U.S. presidential race by some 49%. Not a majority of Americans, but, for sure, a plurality. It was an awful lot of people who said MAGA had won their vote. Well, what does that mean? And what caused them to vote in the way that they did? And they did. Well, he spoke about it on the campaign trail. He's reiterated it for a long time, oftentimes for years. Things such as deconstruction of the administrative state, tariffs, mass deportations without due process, major cuts to federal agencies, elimination of the Department of Education, rethinking of who our allies are, who our enemies are, the role of the United States of America as a helper, the expression of soft power, to now the elimination of USAID. Yup, the times they are a-changin'. So how did all this come about? Simple answer, by people. People whose values proposition may have been in their hearts and minds for a long time, but now have been unleashed. These people are your neighbors, your relatives, your community. They're present in your workplace, the institutions that support us, like your elected officials, your police, your healthcare provider, the judge in your local court. They have leadership positions in your church, your schools, virtually in every connection point of you and your family's lives. So in this episode, I thought it'd be helpful to talk about these people that are our co-workers, our community leaders, our faith leaders, our judicial leaders, our elected leaders. What can we do to better understand those that we are in the service to lead, to follow, and to speak up and speak out about. So today let's talk about those we lead and what may be going on within them in our turbulent world. Okay, so the Dr. John Bedker Leadership Podcast is about leadership. It's about ultimately calling people to rise to do the right thing. Well, I'm going to talk about a book that's come out, talks about this topic of who these people are that we are to lead, to serve, to guide. The book is called The Ideological Brain, and obviously it's about people today and their ideologies. It's by Dr. Leor Zmigrod. She is a political psychologist and neuroscientist. She investigates why the brains are susceptible to extreme ideologies and how minds can break free from rigid dogmas. Well, that's certainly at, I think, the heart of our circumstances today. Just a quick brief on who she is. She's done quite a lot. I'll only mention the shortest of bios. So, Leor completed her PhD as a Gates Scholar at the Department of Psychology at the University of Cambridge in England. She was a junior research fellow at Churchill College, Cambridge, and has held visiting fellowships at Stanford, Harvard, the Paris Institute for Advanced Study, and the Berlin Institute for Advanced Study. So, incredibly qualified, incredibly capable. She has won a number of awards and has been recognized as a thought leader in this field of ideologies. So what I'm going to do is read just a few excerpts from her book, The Ideological Brain, The Radical Science of Flexible Thinking, and again by Leor Zmigrod. Here are just a few quotes. From fascism and communism to eco-activism and spiritual evangelism, ideological groups offer absolute and utopian answers to societal troubles, strict rules for behavior, and an in-group mentality through dedicated practices and symbols. These features exist across the spectrum of ideological persuasions. Such characteristics can emerge when the ideology is guided by the sincerest intentions and even at times the most noble of ideals. Things like protecting human dignity. Okay, so for believers in these ideologies, and folks, this is what I think is important for us as leaders to get a handle on here today, is these are the people that we're charged to serve. These are the people that are, again, our neighbors, are in our communities, are in positions of authority in our institutions. We really need to understand this idea of extreme ideology in our world today. So, typically, this is what Dr. Zmigrod says. Typically, ideologies are imagined as big visions, grand, atmospheric, intangible, and out of our personal control. In the book, she talks about a wide range of isms, but the conclusion is, for believers, the utopian destiny of an ideology seems carved from the clouds of eternity, a looming force soaring above our heads, meant to be venerated and revered. We certainly see that, don't we, today in those MAGA people, the people that are following Donald Trump, who believe in his ideology. Individual minds convert social doctrines into ideological thinking, a style of thinking that is governed by strict mental rules and carefully regimented mental leaps. So says Leor Zmigrod. Well, that's what we're seeing, right? In the case of Trump. And he's but an example of, I think, a much larger changing of the times to wrap yourself around an ideology. So, how did she go about experimenting, testing? I'm going to talk about it here in just a minute a little bit more, but she has done this with thousands of people to play games, if you will, to get them to make choices, decisions, circles, squares, colors, numbers, asking questions about, okay, if you see these three things in sequence, now pick the answer for what would be the next. And by doing this, she learns an awful lot. She details it. She's done this analytically. I don't intend to do that here on the podcast because we can't all see it, but it is quite thorough. It is quite complete. So she would often go down a sequence that would have a person say, okay, I see 1, 2, 3. I get the next one, 4. And she would do this in different ways, again, different colors, different shapes, different numbers, so that people thought they had a handle on the game. They understood it. And then they would get a wrong answer. And they'd go, well, what happened? What's up? And they would have to realize that the game changed. The times, they are changing. Well, let's talk about what she found out. Basically, there are 2 of us, or maybe more, she says. There is the participant who notices the change in the rules governing the game and responds by changing in line with the new demands of the task. This version of you is the adaptable, cognitively flexible individual. When the world changes, you may feel surprise, but have no fear. You change with the times, with the demands of the environment. You're not strongly rule-bound. You're happy to slip between habits. In fact, you don't mind having no habit at all. You easily switch between modes of thinking. You are fluid, elastic. You adapt. However, there is another you. In this version of you, you hate the change. You notice that the fact that the old rule no longer works, and you refuse to believe it. You'll try again and again to repeat the first rule. As I said in the introduction, if the sequence is 1, 2, 3, and one of the answer choices then was 4, you would pick it. But it will be in vain. In fact, you'll be punished every time you repeat the original habit. You get this unnerving beep when you fail that question. It gives you an immediate feedback. This unnerving beep will hit you like a slap in the face. The false and nostalgic belief that the environment around you will magically return and you don't need to change. You persevere even it would be faster to sever ties with the past and move on. This is the cognitively rigid version of you. So which of these copies is you? And for us in this podcast, which of these people is someone you're responsible for, someone you serve, someone you lead, someone you are to follow. The flexible or the rigid, the adaptable or the stubbornly unmoving. Well, maybe you're neither first nor the second. You could be somewhere in between, sometimes adaptable, sometimes rigid. Maybe your flexibility depends on circumstance. At ease, you are fluid, adjusting calmly to novelty or surprise. Yet in the moment of stress, your movements narrow, your thoughts harden. Anxiety solidifies you, rendering you stiff. In fact, your brain comes to mirror your politics and prejudices in strange, profound, and astonishing ways. Ways that challenge how we understand the tensions between nature and nurture, between risk and resilience, between freedom and fate. If our ideological beliefs are related to our cognitive and neural patterns of responding, then we must face new questions about how our bodies become politicized, in what ways we are capable of resisting, changing, and exercising personal agency. So this card game, by the way, is called the Wisconsin Card Sorting Test. And from it, her research has really been groundbreaking. She's done this thousands of times with many thousands of people to determine their mental flexibility. Well, what happens? Here's the sort of summation to jump to the conclusion. Cognitive rigidity translates into ideological rigidity. Let me say that again. Cognitive rigidity translates into ideological rigidity. Now, this might seem obvious to many of us. A rigid person is a rigid person. But in fact, it's not always obvious. Again, that person you went to school with or lived next door to or a relative, you thought you knew, you thought you understood, but in this day of change, using this MAGA movement as the exemplar here, we learn about people in ways that we didn't really understand them before. So there's a link between mental inflexibility and ideological rigidity. And what this does is really helps us to understand those people that we are leading, who they are and why they are behaving the way that they do. So let me take just a moment and give you my experience, because this is something that's troubled me for some years now, with this move, in a sense, to the right, from democracy to a more rigid form of understanding life in America, a rule-based, but rule for few to govern the many. Okay? What has been quite revealing is to understand that fealty to the leader is critical in this ideology. So if you say you know this person, whoever that might be, could be a coworker, could be your boss, could be a neighbor, could be your faith leader, anyone. And again, Trump won by 49%. There's a huge population, nearly half, that are on board with this notion, this ideal of ideological rigidity. You might say, I know them. They're well schooled. They're well trained. They are successful. They're financially secure. They have all kinds of descriptors that would say they're smarter than this. How can they say, for instance, that a person in the United States, in our Constitution, is not entitled to due process? That a person, an individual, could put them on an airplane, send them to a foreign country in a quite hostile condition, a prison such as San Salvador or South Sudan. How could an intelligent person, how could a caring person, how could a neighbor of yours, how could a relative of yours have these views and not you? Well, it has to do, according to Dr. Leor Zmigrod, with our capacity to attach ourselves to ideology. And these ideologies can really demand a lot. I use the word fealty, but it is absolutely a requirement. And whatever reason, whatever logic, whichever truth, whatever facts, and by that I mean real facts, not fake facts, are set aside because of this commitment, this fealty to the ideology. And for that, what we're seeing is this very, very turbulent world with people that we know and, frankly, that we care about, who have created environments, turbulent times, chaotic times, unstable times, uncertain times, where the future often is unknown. So what we need to do as leaders is to make sure that we are aware, that we're cognizant, we're thinking about this, knowing that this change has occurred in our workplace, in our families, in our communities, in our institutions. And be mindful that what we might think that we know about this person may or may not hold in the condition of an extreme ideology. I think this is an important lesson for all of us as we go forward and do our best to do the right thing, to speak up and to speak out when we see rigid ideology fail to meet the needs of those we serve. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much. I know it's a little academic, but I really think this is an important message for all of you leaders to make sure that you get the idea of ideology's impact on each and every one of us. Take care. We'll talk soon.
Thank you for tuning in to Dr. John Bedker's Leadership Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please tell your friends, and of course, please follow our podcast and subscribe. Thank you again for tuning in.